The CHRONO flu. The first misremembering. Nate Ramirez blinked at the crosswalk signal and knew, down to a bone certainty, that he had already stepped out, already been hit, already the terrible lightness of flight and the shattering end that followed. Except the white walking man hadn't lit up yet. Except the delivery truck that had killed him wasn't on the street. Except that he was alive, with coffee in his hand, and sweat on his back, and a voicemail from his boss he hadn't answered. Don't, he told himself. But memory tugged like an undertow. He could feel the old ache of the broken ribs from the accident he hadn't had. He could picture the nurse with the blue-dyed hair that he had not yet met. The light changed. Nate did not move. Behind him, someone groaned, "Are you gonna go, man, or what?" He let the stranger step first. The stranger reached the center line. A scooter swerving into the crosswalk from the side of the street clipped his knee. The man spun around, howled. Ah! Not the truck. Not fatal, but not nothing. Nate crossed the street with a careful, ritual slowness. The day slid forward, one hesitant second at a time. He called in sick from the curb, even though he wasn't. He didn't know what made him do it until he realized he was terrified of creating new events and adding unfamiliar branches to the story his brain had already spoiled. He stared at the city like a set he half recognized. Wrong props. Familiar blocking. He couldn't tell if he was remembering the future or misremembering the past. He was far from alone. They would come to call it the CHRONO flu later. When naming it felt like some kind of control, it wasn't. Chapter 1. The anchors we don't have. By the time Nate made it home, his phone had filled with news alerts, hospital reports spiked in, temporal confusion presentations, CDC guidance. Memories may feel real. Trust external records. Talk show clips of callers weeping because they had already buried their husbands, who were standing next to them, confused and alive. Nate's buddy Marcus Lee, a paramedic, texted, "Dude, we ran 12 calls where the caller swore the person was already dead. People doing CPR on living moms." One guy tried to intubate his brother because he remembered him crashing. Nate typed, deleted, and typed again. "I remember getting hit by a truck. It didn't happen, but a guy still got hurt." Marcus called immediately. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, but it's like the world's out of order." Marcus exhaled through his teeth. Half his calls now start with "this already happened" or taping timestamps on everything. Dispatch is calling people back to take selfies with the clock before we arrive. That's dark. It's worse inside. We had a nurse refuse to give a patient a second dose of medication because she remembered having given it. The patient's blood pressure tanked. Charts say the dose wasn't given. Memory says it was. Which do you obey? The chart? Nate said automatically. Easy, until the chart says one thing at 10:02, and a photo of the chart at 10:02 says another thing. People are double documenting, triple documenting, still arguing with themselves. You think this is a disease? They're saying it's viral, just like the flu, with neurological temporal overlay. My partner Jake is down with a fever, and deja vu is so hard hitting him. He's calling it the now-its. Nate laughed. You sound like you've been up for 20 hours. 28 hours. We keep remembering naps we didn't take. Be careful. I'm working on it. After he hung up, Nate opened the laptop and created a file called Now. He typed, "It's Tuesday at 7:13 p.m. The ceiling fan is spinning. I have not been hit by a truck." He saved it, and his breath eased for a fraction. He took a picture of the screen with his phone. He took a picture with his hand holding the phone. He texted both to himself because he did not trust any single record, any single brain. Then he ate peanut butter from the jar and sat very still and waited for memory to line up with real life. It didn't. Chapter 2. The Nature of Memories. On day 3, the CDC streamed a briefing with Dr. Akrons, an epidemiologist. With a neat beard, a man who had hated surprises. His voice carried the strange calm no one believed anymore. "We're calling this the CHRONO poo," Cupson said. "It presents with fever, headache, amnesia in some patients. The key distinguishing symptom, intrusive recollections that feel identical to episodic memory, but do not match current reality." He raised his hand as if pushing against the wall that only he could see. "We are not prepared here to say these are false memories. We have records and recorded cases where recollection precedes verifiable events that have not yet occurred, and in cases where recollections reference events that never happened in our timeline." He paused on that word, our. "These working theories are being evaluated." He tickled them off with sleepless fingers. 1. The memories are confabulations triggered by neurological insult, vivid but fabricated, anchored by plausible detail. 2. Memories are walked across with alternating timelines that some call event branches bleeding into perception due to a viral effect on the hippocampus, timestamping. 3. The memories are genuine past life recollections, surfaced by pathological failure of the brain's temporal filters. A reporter said, "Are you saying incarnation is on the table?" "I'm saying we don't know. The data is mixed. We have a firefighter in Ohio who remembered the layout of a burning warehouse he swore he had responded to last week and correctly identified the locked side door that saved 3 workers. We also have a boy in Arizona who remembered winning the lottery. He gave numbers that did not win, but did match a drawing in a neighboring state the next day. Make of that what you will." "What about decision paralysis?" "We're observing something we're calling the decision dilemma. If your brain can't tell the difference between what the present choice is and a replay from another time, initiating action becomes hazardous. People are waiting for the correct branch to reveal itself." Dr. Kaplan, another voice asked, "Is society going to collapse?" He did not answer quickly enough. Nate watched the clip twice, and again, looking for a tell, a twitch, a flicker that might be a clue as to what to believe. And our own memories had multiplied. A conversation with his ex, Claire, that clearly had last night, except the text history showed their last real exchange was 6 weeks ago. An exact tactile recollection for installing a new lock on his front door that did not exist when he tried the knob. He wrote to Marcus, "The CDC says this could be alternate timelines, or past lives, or fakes, or all of it." Marcus, "The 4th option. It's real and we're all wrong." Nate, "Helpful." Marcus, "We had a case today. A kid stuck in a dryer. Mom swore she already got him out. We arrived. Dryer was empty. Kid was on the couch watching TV. Mom is in trembles. Says that he died in the dryer last time. The husband says there was no last time. They started screaming about whose time counts. We left him with a social worker and an anxiety kit. I sat in the rig shaking because I don't remember a version where we pulled him out. Which one am I living now?" Nate, "The one where he's still breathing." Marcus, "For now." The ledger. Nate built himself an anchor ritual because he couldn't bear the float. He bought an old-fashioned wind-up kitchen timer, an analog clock, a Polaroid, and each morning he assembled a little altar of now. He wound the timer, set it for 10 minutes, took a Polaroid of it ticking, signed and dated the picture in ink, and held the analog clock next to it, and snapped another picture. He left those pictures scattered around the apartment, like breadcrumbs he could follow back to the moment. He also kept a ledger, a notebook, very small, with ruled lines. At the top of each page he wrote, "This is the first thing I'm writing in this space." He would not turn the page until the ink dried. He would not trust a sentence that arrived complete, as he remembered from the draft he had never drafted. He developed the rule for decisions. If a choice felt like a replay, he would choose differently. If it felt utterly new, he would pause and see where the world tried to correct him. The ledger saved him from the small embarrassments. It did not save him from the big ones. On a rainy Thursday, he found himself in front of Clarice's apartment, a place where his feet had brought him while his head was elsewhere. In his mind, he had already knocked, already apologized, already half cried and half lied about why he pulled away 3 months ago. He had already been forgiven in one river of recollection. His hand hovered, disobedient to his rule. He could not tell if this was the first time. He opened the ledger and started a wet, papery page. "This is the first time I am writing on this page." He wrote, "I am at Claire's door. I have not knocked before." The instant the period sank into the page, the memory, its warmth, its relief flashed out like a filament burning. He realized he did not want to be forgiven just because an earlier version of him had navigated the maze well. He wanted to be the one moving, not the memory, not the mouse. He knocked. Clary answered the door, hair tied in a knot, t-shirt inside out. "Nate! I'm not here because I remember us being okay," he said. "I'm here because I'm not okay." She leaned on the doorframe, uncertain. "You're sick?" "Everyone is," he said. "But I also did this poorly." He gestured between them. "I'm trying to choose something I haven't run before." She let him in. He sat on the edge of her couch like a visiting uncle. He told the truth clumsily. He did not ask for anything. He left her with a hug and felt like neither past nor prophecy. And he wrote in the ledger, "I choose without a script." On the bus ride home, a toddler across the aisle giggled at his Polaroid. The child's mother said, he keeps insisting that he's only 83. Says he remembers the war, but it's not one I know of." "What does he say about it?" Nate asked, and then regretting that decision. The mother shrugged hopelessly. "He said ships with no water, guns with no bullets. The cities sounded like bells. And he says he misses someone named Henry, who he's never met." The toddler patted Nate's knee as if to break the spell. "Are you okay?" the boy said. "Thank you," Nate said. And for the first time since this began, he almost believed it. Chapter 4. The Failures That Come First. The legal system unraveled. Everyone thought it would be the markets or the grid, but law made them into memories. Who promised what? Who did what? Who did when? And when did an act occur in the sequence required by the statute, when two sworn testimonies from the same person yesterday and today contradicted because the witness sincerely remembered both? The judges could not adjudicate when the jurors recalled verdicts before deliberation and argued with the present about foregone conclusions, materials stacked like cordwood. Judge Tom Whitaker of Franklin County was the first to declare his bench temporarily compromised. He issued an order: no testimony may be given without external collaboration. But external collaboration had rot in its too. Videos showing one sequence. Still frames extracted from those videos showed another. Metadata was almost non-existent, and when it did, it conflicted with itself. Cops stopped trusting their own body cams when footage and frame disagreed. Plea deals evaporated because no one can remember an offer had actually made one. A prosecutor in Michigan remembered a confession that did not exist on tape. She cried on camera while the accused held her hand and told her he believed she truly had heard it. The hospitals were next. Triage depends on staging. Who got what when? If the second dose is truly the second dose or secretly an imagined third. Medication errors multiplied. Dr. Gale ER chief at St. Gregory's, instituted a policy. Doses were paired with fresh physical tokens, one-time paper tabs printed with a random code generated by an offline machine. The nurses tore the tab off and stuck it to the syringe and into the chart. No tab, no jab, she said. It helped until patients remembered stealing tabs to hide their addiction and confessed to thefts that hadn't occurred. And then the fights began about where here was. Governments stumbled and fell like men who trusted the stare that wasn't there. City councils tabled legislation because they remembered voting last month. Governors had paused emergency orders because they were sure the pause had already produced the results that they hadn't seen. Elections felt like they were the worst joke. Ballots cast by people who remembered casting them, and ballots not cast by people who remembered staying home for very good reasons, and now wanted to unrefrain. Campaign ads cut to pieces across realities. Candidates apologized for statements they both had and hadn't made. Ports jammed because manifests were wrong. Ships that always arrived on Wednesdays drove into the harbor on Monday. Cranes were staffed. Trucks refused to pick up loads they knew were contaminated by accidents that hadn't happened, or knew there was urgent medical supplies that turned out to be shoes. And markets, late to the party, finally tumbled when too many trays were placed by fingers that remembered profit found only error. Families came apart in quieter ways. Marriages fissured over whose anniversaries was when, whether their first kiss was behind a theater or on the dinner, whether the miscarriage was real or a dream cured by time. Those might sound trivial next to failed election, but ask any society what it's built on, if not certainty of shared stories. Marcus texted next. Jake crashed the ambulance. He swore the light was green. Dashcam shows red. He says in his runways greens are on the right side, not overhead. We benched him. He cried like somebody stole the child he didn't want to get to meet yet. Nate, I'm sorry. Marcus, we're all keeping boxes now at the station. Physical stuff, newspaper clippings, a clock, a lamp, a Rubik's Cube. We scrambled every shift and photograph. If the cube ever matches the photo, before we scramble it, we call in sick. That's genius or religion, Nate said. Marcus, those used to be two different categories. Chapter 5. The Man with the Lantern. Nate started a ritual outside his apartment for the neighbors. Each night, just after sunset, he carried a hurricane lantern down to the stoop and lit it. He left it burning for an hour, while anyone who wanted to could step up, hold the lantern, warm glass, and say one sentence that they trusted as true. No argument, no cross-examination, no debate. At first, Ben Carter from 3B said, "My name is Ben Carter. I have changed the way I sort my packages at the distribution center today." He stared at his shoes. "I've changed it before, but that was in my head. But today, I moved bins with a forklift and stuck labels on the metal and told 6 guys where to stand." "Thank you," said Nate. A boy from 2D said, "My dad is alive right now." His voice crackled. "I keep losing him, but right now he is watching a game." "Thank you," said Nate. Clary came one night and said nothing. She put her palm on the warm glass and touched the flame skid around inside like a big-time jar. When she left, she squeezed Nate's arm once. It felt like a sentence neither of them was ready to say. The lantern hour made a tiny gravity well in the building. It didn't fix the city, it didn't fix anything, but rules grew around it like lichens on a stone. One sentence, tell exactly one. Don't borrow someone else's sentence. Don't try to prove it. Don't return to correct or revise unless the revision is today. On night 12, an old man, Leonard, from 5A, said, "I have been dead 3 times, and then smiled and added, "I am not dead right now." Everyone laughed because it was funny, and because they were learning to carry 2 truths that would have annihilated each other 1 month ago. Nate wrote in the ledger, "The lantern made the circle of memory bounce off, not because the circle was stronger, but because it was warmer." Chapter 6. The scientist tried. Dr. Kaplan resurfaced with more data that answered and unmade everything at once. A controlled study, subjects running the CHRONO flu performed above chance in predicting short-term outcomes and then claimed to be remembering forward, but their predictions degraded when asked to bet money that they would later need. In forward MRI, hippocampal time-tagging regions, lit with patterns that looked like replay for events the subjects were truly new to. The team at Catchwell built a Now Beacon, a compact device that used a sealed offline source of radioactive decay to drive a mathematical counter that ticked in a pattern no algorithm could predict and no human could memorize. It printed that pattern onto paper, patterns that the patients were instructed to consult to tape before acting. A temporarily asymmetric anchor. The lead engineer, Dr. Michael Park, said Entropy's Arrow is now packaged for home use. Some people it worked for. They could touch the tape, feel the softness of the printed dots, and gather their sacred selves into a fraction that was just for this moment. For others, the tape merely became another narrative relic from a timeline whose tape had not been helpful. They resented it like it was a scold. They burned it in the kitchen sinks. Kaplan's team published a pre-printed hinting at the memories, clustered in 3 statistical families, not always cleanly separate, but distinct enough to visualize. Atypical, internally consistent, life history of overlays. What non-scientists would call past lives. A subject reporting long arcs with the same names and faces representing a new arrangement across centuries with emotionally coherent lines. B-type, high fidelity, alternate branch bleed. Events matching our present but divulging around specific choice. Subjects could often name a branch point. The day I missed the exit, when I called and no one answered that call, etc. Type C, noise floods. Vivid but disconnected fragments, stuck like burrs that had a high sensory detail and low narrative continuity. The CHRONO flu did not care about these categories. People weren't lab rats. They were bodies with bills and peoples to love. Trying to subclassify your brain's treacheries did not necessarily make it treat you any better. Still, the models helped a little. When Nate's memories felt like long arcs with the same characters, type A, he treated them like weather, meaningful in the large but unhelpful in the hour. When they felt it like a branch around the decision, type B, he applied the ledger rule. Do the thing you haven't already rehearsed. When it felt like noise, type C, he ate a sandwich and a tangerine and waited for the blood sugar to finish arguing with the past. The decision dilemma weaponized. At first, a large riot didn't start with politics. It started with building code inspection. A contractor named Sam Henson in Cleveland tore a scar through the city because the memory of him told him his inspector had already signed off. The inspector, Evan Price, remembered a fire in the version where they argued on the sidewalk until Sam swung. Sam swung back, and something vile and frightened the crowd leapt forward for a story to inhabit. News channels chewed it. Commentators, with serene certainty of a prophet, named villages based on the flavor of their memories. Within a day, 3 governors had invoked temporary emergency powers. They were not sure if they hadn't already invoked them or not, but the same block burned twice in 2 different feeds. Friends accused friends of betrayal. A month in, a think tank published a white paper arguing with the decision dilemma could be weaponized. You didn't need to hack a system, you just had to flood it with plausible, vivid precognizance. In a city where 1,000 people sincerely remembered curfew at 9 p.m., a curfew at 9 p.m. would appear in the streets whether or not it was law. A black market industry across. Memory seeing videos to cut the exact texture of the CHRONO flu. Recollection designed to stick. Department of Justice tried to ban them and then forgot whether they had. Nate noticed something. The Lantern Hour inoculated people against weaponized floods. Not perfectly, but measurably. The neighbors who had placed warm hands on the hot glass and had spoken the grounding sentence were less likely to riot over seeded memories. He did not know what that meant scientifically, but he knew what it meant practically. Warmth came a fact. Marcus text. We're fighting with thermodynamics and soup. Marcus. I'll take soup. Chapter 8. The night city stopped. The grid failed, not because engineers forgot how to route electrons, but because too many scheduled maintenance windows overlapped due to misremembered reschedules. A gas peaker that should have been on when it was off. Last week's plan. A transmission line had been retired last quarter. Operator logs contradicted themselves. The cascade shrugged off and yet still happened. Nate and the neighbors lit candles and a lantern, and then they ate freezer pops that wouldn't seem to last. In the sudden dark, laughter returned, thin at first, then stronger. Old candle laughter that remembers it still has a story later. Children ran into the stairwell like birds that had just been let out of their cages. Leonard from 5A told the joke. He said that he had learned in 1952, except he was born in 1959. Everyone laughed twice. In the dark, without screens, stories returned too. Not the viral kind, the human kind. Ben from 3B told about changing his bin system at the warehouse. Everyone clapped like he had ended a war. Clary told the story about the first time she had realized she could choose to leave a job before it left her. Lionel from 4C cried quietly because he had never done that, and now he might. A woman Nate did not know, Kendra from 1E. She remembered life as a riverboat mechanic in 1907, and the life as a fisherman on the ocean made of glass. No one dared ask if those were true, but they were certainly real. Around midnight, Nate took the lantern into the roof alone. The city beyond their block lay like a planet waiting for a name. He turned the lantern up and down, mimicking a heartbeat, and thought about the now beacon with radioactive dice, and about how even entropy could be narrated if you were desperate enough. He thought about the man that might be a branch where he had been hit by a truck, where he had met the nurse with the blue hair, and he honored them both like ghosts who had been paid for his night. He opened the ledger, and by moonlight wrote, "I will not let a memory steal the only thing the dead never keep." He didn't specify what that thing was. He wanted the sentence to keep breathing. He closed his eyes. He closed the book like a prayer. Chapter 9. The Trial with No Witnesses. Weeks later, when some electricity had returned, the courts were trying again. Nate was called to serve on a jury. The case was simple on paper, a hit and run at an intersection. A defendant named Owen Briggs, a victim of a shattered hip. The prosecutor had a dashboard footage. The defense had witnesses who swore the car was blue when the defendant's was black. Before Voltaire, the judge, Tom Whitaker himself, face older than years, gave instructions that sounded like literature. "You will not rely on memories unaccompanied by collaboration," he said. "You will not argue with your own past. You will treat evidence as if it had just arrived, even if it reminds you of evidence that didn't. If you find out you cannot do this, you will tell the court and you will be excused." Half the pool rose reluctantly and left. Nate stayed. He felt his ledger heavy in his pocket, like contraband. During a break, he saw the defendant's mother in the hallway, lips moving around like a prayer. She glanced up and said to no one in particular, "In my other life, he did it. In this one, he didn't." Nate almost answered, as if it were the lantern hour, but he stopped. He learned a new rule. The circle of what we can hold together is small. Honor its rim. In deliberation, they watched the dashboard footage. The car looked black, and then blue, and then the night itself bent around the metal. The timestamp flickered. 11:03, 11:04, 11:03. Like a skipping record. A juror named L swore he saw a bicyclist who vanished when they rewound it. Another juror, Dean, remembered a news story about a different intersection with the same car. They argued within their branches until Nate finally said, "Can we list only the things this room agrees on without qualifiers?" It felt childish. It felt like soup. They wrote, "A person was hurt. A car left. This tape exists. The defendant owned a car like this. The defendant's phone was somewhere else at this time." "Is the last one true here?" someone asked. "We have a ping map," someone said, weary. And now the beacon code on the police report says that the ping map was printed after the accident. They felt exhausted. Unto not guilty. Not because they were certain, because they certainly had become the luxury item at the store no one could find. Outside the courthouse, the victim's husband screamed that they were cowards. The defendant cried into his mother's shoulder like a boy, who both had and hadn't done a terrible thing. Nate walked home past the wall where someone had spray painted, "Your bench is not a weapon." He didn't know if that was true, but he wanted it to be. Chapter 10. The Run He Hadn't Taken. On a bright morning that smelled like a new calendar, Nate laced his shoes and ran. He hadn't run since the crosswalk incident almost happened. He took streets he didn't remember. He turned at corners that didn't make him twinge. He waved at a mall carrier named Gus, and a woman walking a dog named Gus, and an older man who might have been Leonard in a different hat. At a mile 3, he reached the overpass and stopped to breathe. A delivery truck downshifted under him, a white box loud in the throat. His legs trembled with a remembrance that he had not earned. He gripped the railing and waited for the truck to pass, and the future to stop tugging him backwards. When his heart settled, he took out the ledger and wrote, "I have not been hit by a truck this day on this bridge." It felt silly and holy to be alive. He wrote another sentence, riskier. "I will get my coffee on Maple, and I will tell the barista my name is without rehearsing it, from a life where she already knows it's me." He trotted down the ramp. The city held. The coffee was good. The barista wrote Nate on the cup and smiled. And in none of the worlds, Nate could feel he did die before taking his first cup. Chapter 11. The letter Claire wrote. Weeks later, after the riots cooled, and the white papers grew longer, the now beacons went in and out of fashion. Claire slipped on an envelope under Nate's door. He opened it like a bomb and found a letter in her precise hand. "You came to my door the first time 3 months ago. In a memory I had where we stayed together, and it went badly, but we were brave. You came to my door again, in the life we are in, and told you the truth, in a present tense. I want to try that one. I don't know what the CHRONO flu is. I don't care if it's a past lives, or branches, or broken timestamps. I only know 2 things help, the warmth and friction. Warmth, because it makes a circle we can stand in, and friction because it slows the slide. If you want, we can be warmth and friction, not a cure, but an anchor." Nate put the letter in his ledger like a flower you're not supposed to press because it won't keep its color. He wrote under it, "I am allowed to choose towards this." Chapter 12. The Nature of Memories Revisited. On a podcast he listened to while washing dishes, Dr. Kaplan tried to answer a caller who asked a question 1,000 others asked. "Doctor, what are memories really?" Cap sighed and said words that made something inside Nate relax. "They are stories with power," the epidemiologist said. "Some are true elsewhere. Some are true elsewhen. Some are true only because they change what we know now. The trick is not to make them your government, but to let them be your library." Nate liked that. He did not plan to trust a library to run a city. He planned to visit it when he needed to remember how large a person can be. Chapter 13. The Choice with No Precedent. Months in, the CHRONO flu still haunted the world like an acute fever that had broken. People built hacks, lantern hours, now beacons, 1-sentence circles, paper tabs, ledgers. Courts insisted on pairs, testimony plus token, memory plus matter. The grids redesigned for slop. Schools taught kids how to speak 1 true sentence a day, and to label it as if they were willing to be wrong about it. One morning, Nate woke before dawn with a memory so clean it made him choke. Claire sick in a white room with a blue light, his hand on her head. A nurse with the blue-dyed hair on duty. The decision about a risky trial. In that memory, he said yes and she lived. In that memory, he said no, and she lived. In that memory, he said nothing, and she lived. It was unbearable because the branch point did not distinguish outcomes. Action and inaction both held her. He awoke sweating and went to her apartment where she stood brushing her teeth and laughing because his hair was a disaster. "What?" she asked around the foam. "I had a memory," he said. And she nodded like everyone nods with a flinch in the little bit of a kindness. "Of you being very, very sick. And me choosing, and choosing did not matter." She spat, rinsed, "Come close. Do you want to choose something that matters right now?" "Yes," he said. "Me too," she said. They held each other in the hallway where no trucks drove and no lanterns burned and no now beacons ticked. But the friction of skin and cloth and breath made enough heat to survive the cold. Later, when the illness did come for someone else, they used the paper tabs and the ledger and the soup. The grief came from this life. It had unduplicated weight of a stone you can pick up and carry to a river. The coda, the one sentence. At the end of a very long year, the courts invited ordinary citizens to record one sentence for the public archive, a catalog of anchors to be kept on paper and on microfilm and carved into a wall. The archive was not law, it was not gospel, it was a lantern the size of a library. Nate stood at the microphone next to the plaque and read, "Your branch is not a weapon." He took a breath and closed his sentence. "My name is Nate Ramirez," he said. "I am telling the truth, for this is the first time right now." He did not add, as his mind wanted, all other times that the sentence had felt true. He stood with this one and let it be enough. Around him, strangers spoke their own sentences, some about love, some about sorrow, some about sandwiches and buses and dogs named Gus. The circle warmed until it glowed. Maybe the chrono flu would never be cured. Maybe the memories were not past lives. Or maybe they were past lives. Or maybe they were neighbor branches. Maybe they were artifacts of the brain trying too hard to make the world a movie with clean edits and a score. Whatever they were, people learned to live without them bowing. They learned to disagree with themselves gracefully. They learned to put their hands on warm glass and attest to one thing, that they did not need to be universal to be true. The city did not go back to the way it was. It became something else, less sure, more kind. It discovered that society can survive without certainty. It was enough to encourage to say, "I am here, I am with you, now." And because he had to, because the ledger and the lantern had taught him, Nate ended his day by writing one last line. "This is the first time I am writing this page."